There's something almost no man has understood, and it's exactly why so many fail when they try to generate a deep impact on a woman. Her pleasure does not begin when you touch her body. It begins when you ignite something inside her mind. And most men never learn how to do that. They believe pleasure is technique, performance, physical ability, when in reality, the men who leave the strongest mark on a woman are the ones who know how to activate three invisible switches in the female psyche. Switches that make her body relax, open, and desire even before any touch happens. This is where the silent conflict tormenting the modern man lives. He can get attention, but not permanence. He can create chemistry, but not depth. He can get a date, but not that feeling that makes her lie down at night and think of him. Remember his tone of voice, the way he looked, the energy he transmitted. He fears being forgotten, fears being replaced by someone bolder, fears being seen as the nice guy who leaves no mark. He tries to do everything right, but precisely because he tries so hard, he fails. David Data says that female pleasure blooms when there is polarity. When a man fully occupies his masculine energy, direction, presence, depth, the woman relaxes into feminine energy, feeling, surrendering, creating pleasure. Most men do not create this polarity. They do not sustain presence, do not generate contrast, do not maintain depth. They try to conquer with words, compliments, jokes, but never with what truly ignites the female body, a masculine emotional state that makes her feel seen, desired, and safe at the same time. The invisible switches that few know how to activate, and even those who doubt this cannot ignore the science. Neuroimaging studies show that the state of passion, desire, and anticipation activates reward and dopamine circuits in the brain long before physical touch. Harvard explains that dopamine is the fuel that makes the brain associate someone with intense pleasure. It is not speech. It is not logic. It is biochemistry. When you activate the right triggers, her brain does the work for you. When you do not activate them, no technique, no charm, no effort will work. What you will learn here is simple and brutal. There are three switches of female pleasure that completely change how a woman reacts to your look, your silence, your touch. There are three codes that few men apply consciously, and because of that, they lose the chance to be unforgettable. Today, you'll understand how these switches work, why they activate deep desire, and how to apply each of them in practice naturally, intensely, and without forcing anything. This video is a turning point. It is a transition between the man who tries to impress and the man who is remembered. It is the difference between being just another one and being the impact. And when you learn to activate these three switches, you do not need to chase. You do not need to compete. You do not need to perform. You simply occupy your place as a man, and her brain does the rest. Switch 1. Focus attention. The pleasure being fully perceived. There is one detail that separates the man who awakens deep pleasure from the one who goes unnoticed. Presence. Not physical presence, but attentional presence. Most men are with a woman, but not in her. He looks at his phone, looks away, answers without intention, moves restlessly. Every small distraction communicates the same silent message. She could be anyone. This is a mistake that drains desire before the connection even begins. A woman feels immediately when she's not being perceived. And this is one of the biggest thieves of pleasure that exist. The practical application is direct. When you are with her, eliminate distractions. Phone face down, body-oriented, slowed breathing, attentive listening. Her pleasure starts exactly here. There's a powerful psychological phenomenon many ignore. Women feel emotional pleasure when they perceive that the man is truly focused. Studies on flirting style show that sincere flirting is marked by total attention, aligned rhythm, steady gaze, synchronized laughter. This creates a sense of connection that immediately increases her emotional openness. But this only happens when the man observes before speaking, perceives before reacting, feels before commenting. Practical application. Instead of trying to impress with her stories, ask 2 or 3 deep questions and follow her body signals. The prolonged gaze, the smile that appears, the breath that changes. This is how you flip the switch of the pleasure of being seen. What is most surprising is that it is not your communication skills that generate pleasure. It is the rarity of your attention. Women get involved when they perceive subtleties that no one else notices in them. When you identify the exact way she touches her hair when she's interested, the micro smile that appears when she feels safe, the brightness in her eyes when she remembers something important, her body responds. The pleasure comes from feeling. This man is here with me. This man notices me. This man understands invisible rhythms. The practical application is simple. Name details, not a compliment, but to show that you truly perceive. Science confirms this with precision. Studies on attraction demonstrate that active listening and bodily presence increase the perception of emotional value. People are naturally attracted to those who observe them without anxiety, without internal competition, without agitation. When you reduce unnecessary movements, when you keep your torso facing her, when you sustain your gaze without invading, your posture itself communicates that you are not on autopilot. You are connected. The practical application is concrete. On dates, reduce gestures, stabilize your body, and speak with the cadence of someone who is not trying to prove anything. The applicable method is what I call the closed attention field. In the first 10 minutes of interaction, you do not try to be interesting. You try to be perceptive. Your job is only to read her tone of voice, her rhythm of words, her body language, the energy she transmits. Only after that do you begin to reveal parts of yourself. This simple inversion switches on the first switch of female pleasure, the pleasure being seen, felt, and chosen. And when this switch turns on, everything that comes after becomes more intense because her body has already begun to open before you even touch. Switch 2, tension and mystery, the pleasure of anticipation. There's a psychological phenomenon that silently decides whether a woman will desire you or forget you, the degree of emotional unpredictability you provoke. And many men destroy this potential before it even begins. They give everything too quickly. They expose intention too soon. They respond instantly. They reveal their whole life in a few conversations. No contrast, no rhythm, no space, no void. When everything is obvious, her brain loses its ability to anticipate. And without anticipation, there's no pleasure. The practical application is simple and immediate. Stop explaining yourself. Reduce excessive messaging and abandon the compulsion to respond in the same minute. Not as a game, but to let desire breathe. A neurochemical truth explains this clearly. The highest dopamine spike does not occur when we receive a reward, but when we anticipate that it is about to happen. Studies show that the human brain reacts more strongly to almost than to now. In feminine desire, this translates perfectly. She feels pleasure not when everything is given, but when she feels something could happen, when there is a small doubt, when you leave something in the air. The practical application is to create micro cliffhangers. Tell a story up to the exciting point and stop. Say you have something interesting to tell and leave it for the next meeting. Give one detail about yourself and save the rest. Keep her curiosity alive, not satisfied. What is curious is that many women do not want to know everything about you quickly. They want to discover. They want to assemble you piece by piece. They want to feel that there is depth, layers, silence, intensity. When you pour out too much information, you kill the construction of imagination. When you deliver little consciously, you ignite the switch of the feminine imagination. That is when she begins to think about you when she's not with you. That is when she tries to predict your next moves. That is when she begins to get involved on her own. The practical application is clear. Offer fragments, not the entire film. Research on reward mechanisms shows that the brain becomes more fixated when there is rewarding uncertainty. When we do not know exactly when, how, or how much pleasure will come, our mind creates anticipation loops. And anticipation loops are the foundation of desire. This is why the predictable man is forgotten, while the man who controls his energy and rhythm leaves a trace. The practical application here is strategic. Alternate intense presence with periods fully dedicated to your life, training, projects, personal focus. This creates emotional contrast and prevents you from becoming a static source. The practical method for this switch is the 70-30 rule of delivery. In every interaction, you deliver only 70% of what you could. You leave 30% suspended for the future, an unfinished story, a response you hold, a detail about your life that you mention but do not develop. This difference creates a powerful psychological force. Her brain continues thinking about you, trying to complete what you did not say. It is this gap that lights the second switch. It is this gap that creates pleasure without you even touching her. If you want to go further and learn how to transform these first two switches into a complete system of emotional attraction, there is a structured path. The code of seduction was created exactly for this. There you understand how to manipulate emotional tension with surgical precision, how to use body language to amplify desire, how to create masculine presence that provokes dopamine, how to control rhythm, silence, anticipation, and energy. These are advanced techniques based on real psychology that cannot be broken down in free videos. In the code, you learn step by step how to lead a woman's mind and body to a state of maximum emotional pleasure using behavior, words, timing, and posture. If you want to master this at a level most men do not even know exists, the link to the code of seduction is in the description and pinned comment. Switch 3. Exciting safety. The pleasure of letting go without fear. Nothing destroys feminine desire as quickly as a man who transmits safety but zero intensity. Nothing scares as much as a man who is intense but without emotional maturity. Both fail for the same reason. She cannot relax. Female pleasure only expands when her body feels it can surrender without risk. And this does not happen with a man who tries to be perfect, nor with a man who tries to be dominant. It happens with a man who is stable on the inside and alive on the outside, a firmly rooted axis that at the same time has pulsing energy. The practical application here is simple to understand but rare to execute. Unite emotional stability with strong personality. Evolutionary psychology is clear. Studies by David Buss carried out in dozens of different cultures show that women prioritize partners who transmit security, direction, and maturity. This is biology, not opinion. But there is a second component that few men can offer: emotional stimulation. A woman feels pleasure when she perceives that a man knows where he is going in life, and at the same time is not too predictable. It is the mixture between clarity and vibration, stability and fire, structure and spontaneity. The practical application is objective. Make it clear to her through your routine, your goals, and your organization that you have direction, and balance it with humor, boldness, and living presence. What is truly surprising about this switch is that it does not demand perfection. It demands unshakability. She may test, provoke, play, tension energy, and the man who activates this switch remains aligned. He does not lose control. He does not try to explain himself. He does not become a victim. He does not raise his tone. He remains self-possessed. This makes her body relax instantly. The practical application is direct. In the face of her drama or emotional instability, reduce your speech. Use short sentences. Breathe slowly. Do not enter her chaos. This is not coldness. This is emotional leadership. Science confirms this pattern. Research shows that partners demonstrate greater desire and emotional openness when a man has high effective regulation. In other words, when he does not crumble under pressure. The female brain associates this behavior with the absence of emotional risk, which facilitates trust, surrender, and pleasure. This stability does not come from techniques. It comes from habits. The practical application is to rebuild your axis. Sleep better, train, have a routine, have goals, eliminate excesses. Your internal stability shapes your tone of voice, your posture, your patience, and your energy. She reads all of this in seconds. The final method of this switch is the dangerous safe harbor frame. Predictable in character. She knows you do what you say. Unpredictable in experience. You do not fall into routine. Do not repeat the same conversations. Do not act like a relationship manual. Unshakable in emotion. You do not oscillate with jealousy, approval, tests, or ambiguity. This is the point where her pleasure explodes. She feels she can surrender because you are safe, and she feels desire because you are exciting. This is a third switch. And when you turn on all three, you stop being remembered as a common experience and become remembered as an emotional landmark. Conclusion: female pleasure is not chance. It is masculine emotional engineering. There is a truth that the average man avoids facing. Female pleasure does not arise from luck, natural talent, or some secret gift that few possess. It arises from the way you occupy your internal territory. It is cause, not consequence. When you understand this, you realize that everything you have lived so far with women was not lack of beauty, money, or the right lines. It was lack of emotional engineering. Nietzsche said that the true will to power is not to dominate the other, but to dominate oneself. And this sentence dismantles the entire masculine fantasy about seduction. The man who controls his impulses, his focus, and his energy becomes capable of controlling the emotional climate of any environment. And a woman feels this like a magnetic field. The three switches fit together like perfect gears. Focus attention, the pleasure of being seen. Tension and mystery, the pleasure of anticipation. Exciting safety, the pleasure of letting go without fear. They are not isolated techniques. They are internal states that naturally and inevitably shape your behavior. When you master tension, you create presence. When you master tension, you create desire. When you master safety, you create surrender. And at this point, you stop being just a pleasant date and become an unforgettable experience. And there's something that no man admits, but every man feels. The fear of being forgotten. The fear of being the average guy. The fear of not marking anyone. These three switches are precisely the antidote to this silent pain. They transform you from a spectator of your emotional life into an author, from someone who reacts with feminine interest into someone who provokes that interest. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be conscious. You do not need to be extraordinary. You need to be deep. This is what makes a difference between men remembered for hours and men remembered for years. The final challenge is simple and brutally effective. In the next few days, do not try to get everything right at once. Choose one switch at a time. First, absolute presence. Then measured mystery. Then exciting safety. One layer per interaction. One calibration per conversation. You will notice that feminine reactions change almost immediately because female pleasure is sensory, psychological, and emotional. And you are learning to access all of this with intention, not with luck. If you want to deepen these three switches at a level that simply cannot be taught in an open video, the code of seduction is the next logical step. There you find practical structures, complete conversations, body language adjustments, tension management techniques, desire maintenance strategies, and models of female emotional reading based on real psychology and scientific studies. They are not loose theories. It is a method, an advanced mechanism that transforms your presence, your energy, and your ability to lead a woman into a state of deep emotional pleasure. Techniques that do not appear on the internet because they require responsibility, awareness, and discipline.